We've known since 1999. We've known that for every one message from the brain going down telling the gut what to do, there are 9 messages from the gut going up telling the brain what to do. Who's the boss?
Welcome to this episode of the Biology of Trauma podcast. I am your host, Dr. Aimie. What you may not know about me is that autoimmunity was one of the ways I discovered my body was holding trauma, and I had not known. I did not think that I had had trauma. And it was during a workup for severe fatigue that we found my ANA levels, or my anti-nuclear antibodies, were very high. These are antibodies that my immune system had made to attack my nucleus, which is where my DNA is held. A visit to the rheumatologist ended as it has for many of you, where they told me, we will wait until you develop the other symptoms for autoimmunity and then diagnose you. There's nothing you can do but wait and see. I was struggling at that time with the fatigue, anxiety, and depression, and to add autoimmunity to that list, these were all things that were strongly associated with the adverse childhood experiences. And so it was autoimmunity that is what started me on my journey to what I do now, leading others through the sequential, integrative approach to creating a biology of safety. And yes, I have reversed all of my autoimmune markers. That's why this topic of early detection of autoimmunity with a history of trauma is so important for me that I share with you. If you are someone who has had adverse childhood experiences or other trauma, you will want to listen and take notes for learning the importance of early detection and what other risk factors are important for you to mitigate more than other people, perhaps. If you know of someone who is at higher risk of autoimmunity due to trauma, adverse childhood experiences, you will want to share this episode with them. You're going to be learning about a very important phrase. It's called predictive autoimmunity in this episode. We're going to answer one question. If you had trauma, early life trauma, what should you know about decreasing your risk for autoimmunity? I have a distinguished guest for this episode, a leading expert in functional medicine, Dr. Tom O'Brien, who holds teaching positions with the Institute of Functional Medicine and the National University of Health Sciences. Often referred to as the Sherlock Holmes for chronic disease, Dr. O'Brien is a chiropractor who has dedicated his career to uncovering the underlying mechanisms that trigger immune responses. What you will learn in this episode: the science of autoimmunity and dysregulated immune responses, the influence of environmental toxins after trauma for the risk of autoimmunity, the significance of predictive autoimmunity and early detection, the role of your gut microbiome in regulating inflammation, whether you really need to eat organic or not for decreasing your autoimmune risk, and practical steps and specific changes that you can make today to prevent or reverse autoimmunity after a history of trauma. With that, welcome, Dr. Tom. There are so many people who are on this, what you call autoimmune spectrum, and they need to know this. And so you talk about ANA being a great marker for people to know just where their immune system is at. Talk to us about that and the value of knowing their ANA marker level.
You bet, sure. When someone first understands that the development of an autoimmune disease is the same mechanism, irrespective which autoimmune disease you get, that Hashimoto's thyroid or rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis, the basic imbalances are very similar for all of them. And that is that the immune system, trying to protect you, is attacking your own tissue for some reason. And what's that reason? And the most common reason now today with our technology we've identified is the amount of environmental toxins that are inside our body already, whether it's heavy metals like lead or petrochemical residue or organophosphates from soaps and the shampoos that we're using and the cosmetics we're putting in our skin, or the pesticides and insecticides and fungicides and rodenticides in the food that we're eating, if it's not organic, that this has never happened before in the history of humanity, that we are accumulating very high levels of all of these chemicals. And you don't feel it when you're accumulating lead or mercury or cadmium or organophosphates or PCBs or phthalates. You don't feel it when it's going on, but it's altering the underlying physiology in your body. Your immune system trying to protect you. Your immune system is just the armed forces in your body, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. It's there to protect you, is attacking this stuff. Well, the problem is this stuff, whatever it is, that I'm not going to get really technical, so I'll just call it stuff, that in our bodies, it often goes into the nucleus of the cell. That means deep into the cell. It was Dr. Buttar many years ago, really fabulous clinician who unfortunately passed just recently. But he was talking on stage one time and he specialized, he was an emergency room surgeon. And his 2-year-old son was vaccinated against his will. This was maybe 15, 20 years ago, and developed autism within a week. And very normal boy until all of a sudden completely gone. And he dedicated his life to fixing his son and figuring out what happened here. And he did. His son is a grown man now in the armed forces and apparently excelling at what he does. But when he was talking about these autistic kids on stage, he said, sometimes you do a heavy metal test and it comes back negative, but you know that the stuff has got to be there. And so you start the detox protocols anyway. And in children, they're very gentle to start with. And you do another test a month later. And sometimes it's the 4th test or the 5th test. All of a sudden, stuff starts flowing out. And the levels are extremely high. I'm not exaggerating. But the first few tests are negative. Why? Because these heavy metals go deep into the nucleus of the cell. They're not in the blood. Well, there's some, but they don't deposit in the blood or in the surface tissue. They go deep into the cells. And the deepest that I know of that something can go into your cell is into the nucleus of the cell. So it goes into the nucleus of your cell. So now your immune system starts attacking this foreign obstacle. This is not a normal cell. This is not a normal nucleus in a cell. I better fight this thing because it's a neoepitope. A neoepitope means it's a new substance that's formed inside the body, a new structure. And the immune system says, that's not kidney tissue, or that's not muscle tissue, or that's not bone tissue. What is that inside those bone cells or muscles? That's a neoepitope. That's a new substance. That's a threat. I better fight that. You make ANA antibodies. Anti-nuclear antibodies. Well, what tissue are the anti-nuclear antibodies to? Any tissue, every tissue. They're anti-nuclear. They're not anti-cardionuclear or anti-brain nuclear. They're anti-nuclear. And so you get these elevated levels of antibodies. Now, when people are diagnosed with non-celiac gluten sensitivity, 87% of them have elevated antibodies to ANA, anti-nuclear antibodies. That's how common this is. So when you find ANA antibodies, anti-nuclear antibodies, it means that your immune system's on fire. It's attacking the nucleus of your cells. Well, which cells? Any cell, every cell. And so where's it going to manifest? Wherever the weak link is in your chain, you pull at a chain, it breaks at the weakest link always. It's at one end, the middle, the other end, it's your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidneys. Wherever your genetic weak link is, well, it's genetics plus, here's a geek word, antecedents, which means how you've lived your life. You eat tuna fish 3 times a week. it's very likely you got mercury toxicity, and that's an antecedent. So your genetics and your antecedents determine where the weak link is of where the excess inflammation day after day after day after day after day is going to manifest.
And yet, when I went into my doctor and we found that the ANA was high, and I hear that many other people have the same experience, I got the message of that's not a problem, right? There's nothing you can do about it. It's just an ANA marker. It doesn't mean that you have an autoimmune disease. And so there's nothing you should do about it until you develop symptoms and then come back. We'll give you the diagnosis along with the medications. And so what you're saying is that no, like this is a problem to have antibodies that are attacking your own cells, and the nucleus of every cell is a problem.
Yes, you have to understand that our traditionally trained doctors are trained to deal with diagnoses. And if you don't have a diagnosis, they don't know what to do. They're not trained in preventive care and preventive autoimmunity. They're just not trained. They just don't know. And the shame is, like shame on you. The shame is most of them have been exposed to something about this concept of predictive autoimmunity, and they poo-poo it. They just don't take the time to study it. And what they tell their patients, oh, it doesn't mean anything. Don't worry about it. So you don't, your test for rheumatoid is negative. Your test for MS is negative. Your test for whatever autoimmune disease are checking, Hashimoto's negative. Don't worry about it. You're fine. If you develop some symptoms and come back. So because I'm trained to deal with a disease diagnosis, and if you have a disease diagnosis, I then will give you some medication to minimize your symptoms, but you'll have it for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And this is such an important topic because actually autoimmunity is one of those conditions that we have seen is strongly associated with the trauma response. And this is developing years. And I think that this is what I would like for you to answer as well is even when autoimmunity is associated with the adverse childhood experiences, and we know that those studies show that children who experience adversity and stress and trauma, many of them can have these autoimmune conditions as an adult. And so it tells me that there's this process that's happening for a long, long time before the diagnosis happens. And so for someone, if they go in and they're catching the ANA marker before they get diagnosed, how long have things been building, Dr. O'Brien, before it actually turned into an ANA marker that we can measure?
I haven't seen any studies that have identified how long the ANA markers themselves before a disease. We know about the antibodies to different tissue, like to thyroid or to your adrenals or to your brain. How long have those autoimmune mechanisms been going on? It's called the spectrum of autoimmunity. And the flagship article that really turned us around in understanding all of this was Melissa Arbuckle in New England Journal of Medicine in 2003. And so we've known about this. There were studies before that, but Arbuckle's article really cemented it. She went to the VA and looked for people with lupus. And she found, I'm not sure now, I think it was over 300 people with lupus in this one VA center. I don't remember the exact number. But if they're in the VA center being treated, they're veterans. If they're veterans, they were in the armed forces. If they were in the armed forces, they had their blood drawn many times when they were healthy in the Marines or the Navy or the Army or the Coast Guard or the Air Force. And what most people don't know is that the government's been saving all of that blood since 1978. They've got tens of millions of samples of our service people's blood. People don't know that. Arbuckle knew that, and she asked for permission to look at the blood of the currently diagnosed lupus patients when they were healthy in the Marines or in the Navy to see if there were any indicators that something was cooking. And she got permission, and she found that every single one of the currently diagnosed lupus patients had all 7 antibodies. There are 7 antibodies to lupus. All 7 of them were elevated years before they ever had a symptom. The average was 9 years, some of them 14 years before they ever had a symptom. And every year, those levels went up a little bit, from elevation, elevate more, elevate more, elevate more, elevate more, every year until they hit a plateau. And then after that plateau, they started getting symptoms. And 6 months to a year later, they got a diagnosis of lupus. And so she identified this. And this was a landmark paradigm shifting article because we finally understood and we had evidence. This is how autoimmunity begins. These antibodies are elevated years before they ever have a symptom, which only makes sense. Because when you have elevated antibodies, by definition, you're killing off more cells than you're making. That's the definition of elevated, meaning too high. So there's a normal level of antibodies to your tissue. Why would you have antibodies to your thyroid? Because, Mrs. Patient, you have an entire new body every few years. Every cell regenerates. How does that happen? You have to get rid of the old and damaged cells to make room for the new cells. That's elevated antibodies. No. That's having antibodies to your thyroid or to your muscles or to your bone. But there's a normal reference range. And if you're in the normal reference range of antibodies to your thyroid or your brain or whatever tissue, that means you're making as many new cells as you're losing. So it's a neutral. That's why there's a normal reference range. But when you have elevated antibodies, you're killing off more cells than you're making. And that goes on for years, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells, killing off brain cells, until eventually you start joking with your friends. I don't remember the way I used to. I must be getting older. Well, how old are you? Well, I'm 34. No, that's not supposed to happen. It is happening, but it's not supposed to. You've got a lot of inflammation in your brain. You got to find out why. So these elevated antibodies, this was Arbuckle's article showed us, is that they're there for years beforehand. And we know with some autoimmune diseases, it's 25 years. The antibodies are elevated before a diagnosis. For most, it's somewhere between 7 and 10 years. For ASCA, anti-Saccharomyces cerevisiae antibodies, that's a common one to check when you have gut problems. It's 3 years. If you have elevated ASCA, you're pretty sure it's 97% accuracy. You're going to have Crohn's within 3 years. Well, I feel fine now. Well, just wait. You'll come back. People think if they don't have immobilizing symptoms, there's no problem. In this world we live in today with so many toxic chemicals that we're exposed to on a daily, just think of the chemtrails and all that crud that we're breathing that's in the air, or the plastic in the water bowl. I'm drinking bottled water. It's healthier for me. Well, not in plastic bottles, unfortunately. You're getting the microplastics now. And so we're all being exposed to so much of this. It's overwhelming. But first you have to understand, this is the mechanism that's going on. And once you understand the mechanism, then you understand what it takes to turn it around.
Now, one of the things that you teach really well on is there are internal environments that actually influence how our inflammation genes operate. And what are those environmental factors that are internal to us that are going to be influencing all of this behind the scenes?
36% of all the small molecules in your healthy bloodstream are the exhaust of the bacteria in your gut. I call it the exhaust, but it's the metabolites. If you exercise really hard to work your bicep muscle, the next day your bicep muscle is sore, it's lactic acid that's just accumulated and you didn't flush it out. You're going to be sore for a day or two. Okay, no big deal. That's just the exhaust of the muscle cell working. Your bacteria have exhaust. They're called metabolites. 36% of everything, of the small molecules in your blood, are the exhaust of the microbiome. It's hard to fathom that one if you think about it. Why? These guys are the messengers turning your genes. Genes don't turn on and off so much. They operate on dimmer switches. So ramping up your genes of inflammation or ramping up your genes of anti-inflammation, turning down your genes of inflammation or turning down your genes of anti-inflammation. The metabolites of the microbiome have their hands on the steering wheel of where your body's going. That's why over 1/3 of all the small molecules in the blood are the exhaust of the microbiome. We've known since 1999, when Michael Gershon from Princeton wrote the book for the lay people, The Second Brain. We've known that for every one message from the brain going down telling the gut what to do, there are 9 messages from the gut going up telling the brain what to do. Who's the boss? The boss is your gut. And when you've got an imbalance in your gut, the technical term is dysbiosis, means too many bad guys, not enough good guys. The bad guys, the messages they're sending into your bloodstream are messages to grab a hold of the dimmer switch and ramp it up of inflammation. So you get more inflammation throughout your body, and wherever your genetic weak link is, the antecedents and genetics come together, that's where that inflammation is going to cause the most problem. That's the mechanism in the development of most autoimmune diseases. Yeah, I mean, it's PhD level study, but this is the basic concept. They're teaching this at Harvard Medical School now. At last. Yet at last they are. Because this is just basic. And every physician needs to understand this.
And this idea that the gut is actually controlling our genes and has a greater influence than what we've maybe even put on our brain changes everything. Because then now we have to talk about, well, what are we feeding our gut? Like, what's going on in my gut? And it goes back to all of the toxins, the pesticides, the food, and it makes the food choices that much more important. At least
I'll give you one example, if I may. Journal of the American Medical Association, arguably the most prestigious journal in the English language to publish research in, heavily screened, junk doesn't get in there. The paper was published in 2019, and the editors of the journal said, this is an elegant study using sophisticated biomarkers to show their point. Now, the editors of the Journal of the American Medical Association don't say that very often. That's like the good housekeeping stamp of approval, right? And they don't say that very often. So I saw that and I said, oh, I need to read this study. Okay. And they looked at couples at assisted fertility centers. And as you know, they're spending tens of thousands of dollars and lots of stress trying to get pregnant and have a healthy pregnancy. And they ruled out every conceivable contributing factor to success or failure. That's why they said this is an elegant study using sophisticated biomarkers. They ruled out smoking and obesity and exercise or no exercise. They race and income levels, socioeconomic class. They ruled all of that stuff out, and they narrowed it down to the number of servings of fruits and vegetables per day, and are they organic or conventional? And when they did that, and they divided those groups into fourths, the lowest, the next, the third, and the highest, those in the highest category of eating conventional fruits and vegetables compared to those in the lowest category of conventional fruits and vegetables, those in the highest category had an 18% less likelihood of getting pregnant and a 26% less likelihood of delivering a baby if they got pregnant. They lost the baby. The more fruits and vegetables you eat, conventional, the worse the outcome. Now, I was like, what? Another paradigm shifting article. There's like, what? Because we all know fruits and vegetables are the way you're supposed to go, the Mediterranean diet and all that. And then those in the organic category were the exact opposite. The more fruits and vegetables you're eating organic, the greater the success rate and the healthy pregnancy and healthy delivery. And they
This is
define,
huge.
this is huge. They defined organic as 3 times a week, not every day, just 3 meals a week. No, 3 times, not meals. They said 3 times. I don't know if that meant 3 days or 3 meals, but in the article, they wrote 3 times per week. Now that's a no-brainer to do for everyone, but a 26% loss of a baby if you're eating more conventional fruits and vegetables. It's like, what? That's the effect of the toxins we're being exposed to on a daily basis. And people don't get this. They don't understand this. We have to wake up. You're killing your bodies quicker than you want. Eat more fruits and vegetables, you get sicker. Unless they're organic, because there are so many pesticides, insecticides, formaldehyde, antibiotics. They spray lots of fruits and lots of vegetables with antibiotics before they harvest them. So you're getting residue of antibiotic when you eat your eggplant or you eat your peppers. You're getting residue of antibiotics that kills your microbiome. And now you get more dysbiosis, which sends messages in the bloodstream of inflammation. I mean, when you really look at this, it's paradigm shifting. It changes the way you think. And I'm a little aggressive about it tonight because, I just got news today that one of my patients from years and years ago just died. And so they never really embraced the concept of organic and or gluten-free. And they're really nice people. He was 52. And so I'm like, wake up, world. Wake up. This is not rocket science. You just don't like it. You don't like that it's a nuisance to have to do this. I want it convenient. Well, we'll put that on your tombstone.
I mean, no, this is exactly it, right? Because we can feel well, and some of the changes that can happen are so subtle that we laugh them off until it turns into a full-blown condition or diagnosis, and then we're faced with this big, massive thing. And so being able to show that, no, like this stuff is happening underneath the surface. This is our physiology, and this can be building for years, which also means for me, Dr. Tom, that we can turn this around. Like wherever we are, that we can turn this around and we can say, all right, if I start eating organic, if I start minding these things that are driving my biology, my physiology, my genes, I can actually set myself on a different path. I'm not stuck here. I'm not set for this doom and gloom picture that I think is the modern picture of health.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And organic was 3 times a week and got dramatic results. So ideal would be every day. So you just reduce your exposure to all these toxins. I mean, there's so much to learn. There really is. But once you understand this bigger picture, then the concept is, all right, I'm on a journey here, and I'm going to learn quite a bit in the next 6 months to a year. And it's going to take a while. And that's why, I always sign books the same way. It's always the same. I ask the person their name, and I write down their name, and then I write base hits, win the ball game. Tom O'Brien. That's the message. That's the only way to be successful at this, is to do the little things, developing the lifestyle habits. When you learn that storing your leftover food in plastic containers in the refrigerator, you get phthalates in the food the next day that are toxic plastic chemicals, plasticizers. And you go to my book and there's 3 URLs for glass storage containers. And you say, oh, okay. And you go online to Miles Kimball or Amazon or the third, I don't remember the third one, whatever it was. And you say, oh, I like those. And you order 3 round ones and 2 square ones and 1 for the pie, pay the credit card. You're done. It took an hour. But you're done. And never are you going to poison your family again with minute amounts of poison from plasticizers in the leftover food. That's why my book is called You Can Fix Your Brain. I argued with Rodale Press for 2 weeks on the title. They wanted some different. No. This is the message in the book. You can fix your brain. And
I love it.
the subtitle was just 1 hour a week to the best memory, productivity, and sleep you've ever had. And that's the key to success. We'll wrap it up here with that one probably. That's the key to success is you allocate 1 hour a week to learn one new thing. Like you get glass storage containers, or you find organic nail polish, or you look for a farm in your area that has organic produce, or just 1 hour a week. And in 6 months, you've changed the lifestyle. You've changed your home, everything about how you live your life. You've got a handle on it now because you can't do it all at once. It's just 1 hour a week.
Stay out of the overwhelm. 1 hour a week.
Yes.
Dr. Tom, thank you. And where can people find you?
The doctor.com. Just don't spell the word doctor out. The Lots of videos, our books, handouts. They're all there. So I hope that we can assist you and guiding you on your journey to learn more how to raise a healthy family and have a healthy, vibrant, high quality of life.
Today, we dove into an important topic, the predictive autoimmunity and the essential knowledge for everyone with a history of trauma. If you know you have stored trauma in your body and you think it might be time, I invite you to learn the specific sequence to addressing stored trauma in the body safely. There are things you need to do before we start processing our trauma and stories. Or else you might find, like I did, that it actually triggers flare-ups and recurrent symptoms of fatigue, depression, anxiety, autoimmune symptoms. And so we need to be smart about how we open up our body, or else we can make ourselves sicker and re-traumatize ourselves in the process. You will want to know about the essential sequence, the 3 steps for safely addressing stored trauma in the body, and I will have that guide for you in the show notes. If you are interested in this topic of autoimmunity and stored trauma, you will want to listen to these other podcasts. Episode 49 is all about the freeze response. If you don't know about the freeze response yet, you need to know about the freeze response because that is the specific element of the trauma response that is very strong in autoimmunity. Episode 49 was about beneath the surface, the childhood freeze in autoimmunity going into attachment insecurities. Episode 71 is also one that you will want to take a look at. It's understanding the trauma connection between attachment, autoimmunity, and fatigue to find your way out. Back in episode number 10, I brought in the story of someone who had progressive multiple sclerosis and the role that addressing unresolved emotions played for her. It's actually an interview with Dr. Ariel Schwartz, one of the trauma experts. And I weave in the story of Laura Bautista, one of the biology of trauma professionals, with her experience with reversing progressive multiple sclerosis. Finally, episode 67 is with Gabor Mate, and it's on healing trauma and chronic illness through connecting with our body. This is part 2 of the lessons learned of the trauma chronic illness connection. Remember, you want to be creating a biology of safety. And so you will also want to address the support that we can provide ourselves and our body. On my online store, I have a weighted neck scarf because they help create that felt sense of safety that is essential for those of us at risk of autoimmunity. Vitamin D is another product I have in my store because every patient I've had with autoimmunity came in with lower vitamin D levels that are optimal for those trying to prevent or reverse autoimmunity. And finally, I ask you to take a moment to review this Biology of Trauma podcast. As you know, I am here to bring you practical, valuable information that will help you accelerate your trauma healing journey or the knowledge and tools to do so with your patients or clients. Your reviews and feedback are how I know how to improve this podcast, bring you great content, and help others find information that could change their life. With that, I'm your host, Dr. Aimie, and until next episode, lots of love.